Okay, good evening. Welcome to tonight's halacha shir. The shir is entitled "The Power of Saying Amein." If you're listening online, please email me at j.golker@gmail.com. I'll send you the handout. The connection to the parsha, we always try and find the connection to the parsha if we can, and it's a very neat connection because the parsha begins with Bikurim, and then it moves on to, before the Teichacha, at the end of the parsha, it talks about the klolos and the brachas on Har Eval and Har Grizim, and you have 6 shvatim on one side, 6 shvatim on the other side, the Kohanim and Levim standing in the middle, repeating the brachas and the klolos, and all the Klal Yisrael responding by saying Amein. So if you look at the first box, you see that V'onu halvim v'omrel kol ish Yisrael kol b'kol ram or ha'esh sheyasa pesla masecha etc. V'onu kol ha'om v'omru Amein. So you have a very good example of saying Amein in the Torah. This is a good precedent for the concept of saying Amein. Now, what does that actually mean? So the simple explanation of Amein is that it means I agree. In other words, a person makes a bracha. I just made a bracha on my drink, a shahakal. You would hear the bracha, you would say that when I said Baruch Atah Hashem, you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the source of all brachas, the King Melech HaOlam, who runs the world, the King of the world, Shahakol Niyeh B'Dvar, that everything comes about through His word, you're listening and saying, Amen, I agree. That's the simple explanation. The Gemara in Shabbos, Daf Kuf Yud Tes on the base in the second box says, my Amen. What exactly does Amen mean? Amir Bichanina, it stands for Amen, Aleph Mem Nun, Kel Melech Ne'emon. It's an abbreviation of those 3 words. What exactly does that mean? Kel Melech Ne'emon ultimately is a declaration of belief and of faith, but specifically Kel, that Hashem is omnipotent and is the source of all reality. Melech, that He supervises and runs the world. And Ne'emon, He's trustworthy, He's fair, i.e. He doesn't give you anything more or less than you can handle. That's really what you're saying when you say Amen. Kel Melech Ne'emon. Now, the Gemara in Brachas, Daf Mem Zayin Amud Aleph, says lots of rules regarding Amen. It's interesting and it's actually a bit scary. The Gemara says there, this is in box number 3, Tonu Rabbanon, Ein Oinin Lo Amen Chatufa. You're not allowed to say an Amen Chatufa. We'll see what that means. V'lo Amen Ketufa. V'lo Amen Yesoima. You can't say these 3 Amens. That means an Amen Chatufa, Ketufa, and an Amen Yesoima. We'll see how that is defined. V'lo Yizrek Bracha Mipiv, and you shouldn't just throw out the bracha. Moreover, if you go and do this, says the Gemara, Ben Azai Omer Kol Ha'oin Amen Yesoima, Yibonav Yesoimim, Rachmon Litzlan, your children will be Yesoimim. Or Chatufa Yischatfu Yamav, your days will be snatched away. Or Ketufa Yiskatfu Yamav, also will be sort of slip away. But anyone who extends the Amen, then his days and years will be extended. Okay, so what do all these things mean? So Rashi says as follows: Chatufa, you shouldn't say an Amen Chatufa, Shekorin es ha'alef b'chataf v'lo b'patach. That means, in Rashi terminology, that instead of putting a komotz or a patach under the aleph, Amen, instead you put a shava under the aleph. Now if you put a shava under the aleph, then that just says main, you're not pronouncing the aleph. So just responding main as opposed to Amen, that's called an Amen chatufa. You don't pronounce the aleph properly. An Amen ketufa, says Rashi, shemechasa kriyas hanun, you don't pronounce the nun, so that's the opposite. I.e., you say Omer and you don't finish it off. So you don't pronounce the nun properly. And Yesoima, says Rashi, Shaloi Shoma HaBrocha, that you say Amen, but you haven't heard the bracha. In Amen, you hear other people saying Amen, and you sort of join the bandwagon, but you haven't heard the bracha. Now, Rashi's got a problem with that pshat, which he himself addresses. Says Rashi, but surely the Gemara in Sukkah, Daf Nun Aleph Amud Aleph says, famous Gemara, that in Alexandria, in Egypt, Hayu manifin b'sudarim, they would wave flags. The shul there was so enormous, and there were so many hundreds of thousands of people, the Gemara says, that they couldn't hear. So therefore they had a flag waving system, Hayu manifin b'sudarim k'shegea es lanos amein, that's whenever exactly how it works, I'm not sure, but let's say they would raise a red flag for Baruch Hu Baruch Shemai, a yellow flag for Amein, and people will respond. So you see clearly, Al Meloi Shamik V'Ka'anu, that they don't hear the bracha, yet they're responding Amen. So therefore, surely they're violating this Gemara, which says, Ein Oinin Lo Amen Yesoima. So Rashi himself answers, Hanu meide yodi shehem oinin ach abracha, val eze bracha im oinin, ele shelohu shomin es hakol. They knew which bracha they were responding to, it's just that they didn't hear the bracha being made. Now, how does that work? That means, I presume, that your inshul, the Chazoras Hashatz, for example, is about to start, you hold kop, you remember, right, that's the first bracha, you remember the first bracha ends Mogen Avraham, the flag goes up, you say Amein, you know that the first bracha is on Mogen Avraham, I didn't hear it, but that's what he must be saying. Then you hear the next bracha, Mechayim Esim, Atzah Kodesh, etc., etc. That's how Rashi learns. Tosfos learns differently. Tosfos learns that the case of Alexandria only refers to brachas where the person is being moitzi you. For example, Kiddush after shul. That if you don't hear the bracha, then you can't, because it works through Shomer Ka'ina. And therefore, if you don't hear the bracha, then it doesn't work. And therefore, says Tosfos at the bottom of the page, it must be referring to that, and therefore it's referring to Birchasat, the person getting aliyah and saying a bracha over Sefer Torah, that sort of thing. Okay, that's how Tosfos learns. The Chidushei Hara'ah gives a different pshat to Rashi. He says, you know what Amein Chatufa means? Says the Ra'ah, Pirush Koidem Chasimus HaBracha. That a person jumps in and says Amein before the Mavarech has a chance to finish it. He snatches it. Amein V'lo Amein Katsara, V'lo Amein Katufa. Pirush Memahe Kriyosa. He says it too quickly. V'lo Yizrek Bracha Mepiv. Rashi says, Lo Yizrek Bracha Mepiv is b'mehiris. Don't say the brachas too quickly. As if says Rashi, Shedoim elav kamasa. It's like a burden. It shouldn't be like a burden for you. The Ra'ah says, Inami, alternatively, he says, that means that the Baal Tefillah should only begin the next bracha when the people have had a chance to respond to Amein. You sometimes see that in a person davening. He says, let's say, Baruch Atah Hashem Chayden Adoah. So he says, Baruch Atah Hashem, and he should wait for people to say, Baruch Baruch Shemai, and then Chayden Adoah. But if a person is a bit too quick, he is saying Chayden Adoah when everyone else says Baruch Baruch Shemai, and they've missed it. They haven't heard the Amen. So it's all of the above. So that's what it could refer to. As per Rashi, that you're not pronouncing the Aleph properly, main, or you're not pronouncing the Nun properly, or may, or that you are Yosema Shalosh Shoma HaBracha, or according to the other pshatim, that you say Amein before the end of the bracha, or you say it too quickly, or you begin the next bracha so you don't give people a chance to say Amein. All of those various pshatim. The Shulchan Aruch, if you took a look at the next page, he paskins like all of them, with the Ramah there, and therefore that he brings Rashi, brings Tosfos, and the other pshatim, and therefore one should avoid all of the scenarios which you've described till now. The Kitzur Shulchan Aruch adds another pshat when he says that a person shouldn't do Amein Yesoma. Amein Yesoma he defines, not like Rashi and the Ra, but he says that you shouldn't delay too long after the bracha has been said. In other words, the person says the bracha, you should answer Amein straight away. Don't delay responding Amein. Okay, all of the above. Now, that Adkan, that is Amein. The Gemara in Shabbos then goes on and talks about Amein Yehi Shmei Rabbah. Says the Gemara in Shabbos Kuf Yates on the base, Omer B'Shu ben Levi, Kol ha'oine Amein Yehi Shmei Rabbah mevarich b'chol koichai. Sorry, Yehi Shmei Rabbah mevarich b'chol koichai. He says Yehi Shmei Rabbah mevarich with all his kavana. Rashi says that's his explanation of kol koichai. Koirin loy gazar dinai. His gazar din, any evil decree, is ripped up. That is the power of saying Amein Yehi Shmei Rabbah. Rabbi Chia Ba'Abba says, the Gemara continues in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Afilu yesh b'shemet shlavir zor. A person can have very negative averis. Meichlin, he's forgiven. And then the Gemara says, Kol ha'ina Amein b'chol koichai peitzchen l'shar Gan Eden. The gates of Gan Eden are open for him. So very powerful thing saying Amein Yehi Shmei Rabbah, and indeed saying Amein. Rabbi Pesach Koren, I think it's him, tells a fabulous story with someone called Yisrael Zichman. He's a Rav in Kiryat Sefer, and he knew of a person in his community called Dr. Steen. And he knew that Dr. Steen was not always religious. In his early years, he was a Baal Tshuva. In his early years, he was not religious. But now, later in life, he was religious, now living in this, in I guess, in Kiryat Sefer. And one time, Reb Zichman asked him, tell me, what made you become religious? So the Dr. Steen told him an amazing story. He said, that in his early years as a medical doctor, he once had a patient, an older man, who had a very difficult decision to make, because the medical advice was that he needed an operation, but the operation was very risky and it involved a lot of pain, and there was no guarantee of success. It may increase his years and it may not. And the question was, is it the right thing to do? And it was a difficult medical decision. And when he explained the situation to the patient was very calm and just said, I need to discuss this with my rabbi. And Dr. Steen was surprised. You go to a rabbi for a medical decision? He said to him, can I come with you? I'd like to know how your rabbi deals with these situations. He said, with pleasure. So this patient takes him to Moshe Feinstein. And Moshe is sitting there, he sits there with the doctor and with the patient. They explain the situation. And Moshe sits there listening intently. And after they finish explaining the situation, Moshe turns aside and the doctor sees that he's crying. He's sitting there crying for several minutes. And after he sort of collects himself, he says, it's a very difficult decision. I need time to think about it. Could you please both come back tomorrow? Okay? They come back tomorrow, and Moshe says to them that he's thought about it, and he says on balance he feels that they should have the operation. And he understands the risks and the dangers, but he said, if you prolong your life, you will have more opportunity to say Amein. When you say Amein, you're creating malachim. The gematria of Amein is 91. Aleph, Mem, Nun, 1 and 40 and 50 is 91, which is the same gematria as malach. Mem, Lamed, Aleph, Chof. So every time you say Amein, you're creating malachim. He says you will have the opportunity to say Amein for longer, and please God, those malachim will help you. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should guide them and help you. These malachim will somehow protect you. And sure enough, the guy had the operation and he lived for many more years. But the empathy that Moshe showed, that he cried and he thought about it, and his response was so powerful to this secular doctor, that actually was the trigger for him becoming religious. Now, interestingly, what does Yehei Shmei Rabbo actually mean? The Gemara says, and Rashi says, Kol koicha means Kol kavanosai, it's all his kavana, all with proper kavana. But what is your kavana? What do you actually mean when you say, Amein Yehei Shmei Rabbo? So it's very interesting because there is a machlokas what it means. The Machzavitri, who is a Talmud of Rashi and collects many minhagim from Ashkenaz and from Rashi, he says something fascinating. Amein Yehei Shmei Rabbo means, may your name be full, be great as in full. What does that mean? So if you look at the box, in the second box in paragraph 5, a pasuk from the Shira in Pashas B'Shalach. Vayomer ki yod al keis ka milchomo lashem ba'amolek midardar. Says Rashi, why al keis ka is case short for kisei, a throne, a chair, and ka, yud and a hey, is also half of Hashem's name. Says Rashi, umahu case, v'lo nema kisei, the full version, v'af Hashem, the name of Hashem, nechlik l'chetzye. Nishba kodesh baruch hu she'ein shmoi shalem ve'ein kisei shalem ad she'yimoche shmoi shel Amalek kulei. Famous Chazal, that Hashem's name and his throne is not complete until Amalek have been eradicated. Therefore, vayomer ki yod al keis ka is an abbreviated, shortened form. It's not kisei, it's not the full name of Hashem. Therefore, Amein Yehei Shmei Rabbo means, may his name be full, i.e., Moshiach should come. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name, because with the eradication of Amalek, Moshiach will come, and therefore Hashem's name should be complete. Taisvus, on the other hand, and this is in the beginning of Brachas, Taisvus says that it means Yehei Shmei Rabbo Mevarach, may the great name of Hashem be blessed. And I think if you stop people in the street, you ask them, what does Amein Yehei Shmei Rabbo mean? They'll tell you probably like Taisvus. Yehei Shmei Rabbo, may the great name Mevarach be blessed. Okay, there's discussion about this. There's a Gemara in Sukkah, Daf Lamates, which possibly there could be a support for Taisvus. Because Taisvus, the Gemara says there in Lamates in Sukkah, a person shouldn't break up the phrase Yehei Shmei Rabbo, pause, Mevarach, and Yehei Shmei Rabbo Mevarach Bahadodi, because otherwise you sort of suggest you're breaking it in the middle. It could be sort of almost deemed to be blasphemous. But there, that seems to be a support for Tosfos, because according to the Machzor Vitri, Yehei Shmei Rabba is actually a complete phrase. That is the blessing. Yehei Shmei Rabba, may his name be blessed. So therefore saying it standing alone is not a problem. Okay, either way, that's not really, it's too much for tonight, but the Chidah in Riki Yosef, he defends the Machzor Vitri from this Gemara. One final point, and that is, when you say Amein, it shouldn't be too loud. The Gemara says in Brachas Memhei, Omer B'chalan Ba'abo, Minayin La'ina Amein, Shelo Yagbia Koilo Yosef Mevarich. The responding Amein shouldn't be louder than the person who's saying it. Well, how do I know that? Shenem Agadol Hashem Iti Unrim Hashem Yachtov. Praise Hashem Iti, with me. I.e., it should be the same volume. And the Shulchan Aruch paskins it. In Hilchos Tefillin, Kuf Chaft Alad, in Sif Yud Beis, the Shulchan Aruch writes, Ha'inu Amein, Lo Yagbia Kolo Yosem HaMavarich. He shouldn't raise his voice more than the Mavarich. And the Mishnah Berurah says, why? Because it says, Gadol Hashem Iti, V'nireh, not only for that, to Hu Adin Le'inin Baruch Hu Abirchas HaZimah. I.e., the person says, Baruch Hu Es Hashem HaMavarich, your response should not be louder than the Chazan. Or the Zimun, Rabbi Sainavarech, your response should not be louder than the person being Mezamid. However, says the Mishnah Berurah, Nira, for those loud Amein respondents in Shul, says the Mishnah Berurah, Nira in Kavnos B'Harim HaKol, if the Kavona in doing it loud is Kadei Lazarez Laha'om Shayanu Gamheim, Mutter. If you're doing it to encourage others to respond, that would be okay. But otherwise, one shouldn't do it too loud. So, what have we seen? The power of saying Amein connected to this week's parasha. Va'onu kol ha'om va'omru Amein in Parshas Kisovo, to the klolas and to the brachas in this week's parasha. The meaning is simply that I agree with what you've said. Moreover, the Gemara in Shabbos says it's short for Kel Melech Ne'emon, which is a declaration of faith and belief, as we discussed. Saying Amein properly is very, very important. There shouldn't be an Amein Chatufa, Katufa, Yosema, and we've defined exactly what they mean, and they're all the various pshatim are brought by the Shulchan Aruch, which is in box number 4. And again, Yehei Shmei Rabba has an extra sort of power, as it were, that it's Kairin Gzardina, it's Meichin Le'Avonosov, and then Amein Stam is Peischin Le'Shari Gan Eden. Plus you've got the story that the creation of Malachim with each recitation of Amein, as per the story with Rav Moshe. And Yehei Shmei Rabba, different meanings what it could mean. Either it's the tefillah that Hashem's name should be complete, Yehei Shmei Rabba, or it could mean that Hashem's name, the great name of Hashem, Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevarach, that the great name of Hashem should be blessed. And not to do it too loud, louder than the person being Mevarach, unless you're doing it, the Zar is Es Ha'am.